I woke up to the growl of a plow and the sound of snow slamming against my fence, like someone was dumping buckets of ice onto my yard. It was still dark outside. The kind of winter morning where everything feels quiet till it doesn't. I pulled the curtain back and saw a big HOA contracted truck reversing along the street. Blade up, pushing a mountain of snow straight onto my property. Not near the curb. Not a little spillover. I mean fully onto my yard, like it was their personal snow storage lot. The driver didn't even look my way. He just dumped, pulled forward, and left me staring at a new white wall that wasn't there an hour ago. That was the first time it happened. I told myself it must be a mistake. I had just moved into the neighborhood a few months earlier, and I was still learning how everything worked. The houses were nice, the lawns were perfect in summer, and the HOA newsletters were intense, but I figured snow removal was one of the few benefits of living here. Then I looked at the damage. My decorative edging was buried. My small young maple tree was bent under a heavy pile. And the walkway I had shoveled the night before was now trapped behind a frozen ridge that would turn into solid ice by morning. I did what any normal person would do first. I walked outside and tried to fix it myself. I grabbed a shovel, dug a path, and started moving snow back toward the curb. 10 minutes in, I realized I was losing a battle I didn't sign up for. The pile was dense, mixed with road slush and gritty salt, the kind of snow that feels like wet cement. My gloves soaked through. My boots slipped. And the most frustrating part was that it wasn't even whether. It was a decision someone made, someone decided my yard was the best place to dump the neighborhood's snow. Later that morning, I emailed the HOA manager. I kept it polite. "Hi, I think the plow accidentally pushed snow onto my yard. Can we prevent that next time?" I even attached a picture. I expected an apology or at least a promise to mention it to the plow company. Instead, I got a short reply. "Snow placement is part of standard operations. Thank you for your understanding." That was it. No explanation. No concern. It felt like a brush off, like I was being told, "This is your life now. Deal with it." A few days later, another storm hit, and I stayed up late to watch what would happen. Sure enough, around 4 a.m., the same style truck came down the street. It slowed near my corner lot, lifted the blade slightly, angled it, and pushed snow across the curb like he was aiming for my grass. I watched it happen in real time. Not an accident. Not spillover. It was a targeted convenience. My lot sat at the bend of the road, and my yard was the easiest place for them to toss the extra snow without narrowing the street too much for cars. I went out the next morning and found something that made my stomach drop. One of my sprinkler heads was snapped clean off, and the ground around it was gouged. Under the snow pile, the grass was torn up like a bad haircut. I wasn't just losing a little yard space. I was losing landscaping I paid for, and I was losing it repeatedly. When spring came, I knew I'd be the one raking out rocks and trash the plows dragged in. And while my neighbors waved from their clean driveways, I was standing next to a filthy snow mound that looked like it belonged in a parking lot. I tried talking to my next-door neighbor, Mr. Daly, who'd lived there for years. He sighed like he'd heard it all before. "Oh yeah," he said, "they always dump there. It used to be the previous owner's problem too." When I asked why no one stopped it, he shrugged. "HOA says it's common area management or some nonsense. If you complain too hard, they will find something to fine you for." He lowered his voice as if the mailbox might be listening. "Just be careful with them." That warning stuck with me, but I wasn't ready to roll over. I read every page of the HOA rules, looking for anything about snow. There was plenty about lawns, height, weeds, flowers, even the color of outdoor curtains. But snow disposal, barely mentioned. It said the HOA handled plowing the roads and maintained safe conditions. Nothing about using private property as a dumping ground. I printed the page, highlighted it, and wrote another email. This time I asked directly, "Can you confirm the HOA has permission to place road snow on my property?" I attached the rule section. I stayed calm. I stayed factual. The response came the next day, and it was bold. The manager wrote, "Snow must go somewhere. Your lot is positioned to assist with road clearance. This is temporary and seasonal." It wasn't an answer. It was a statement of power. Like they were saying, "You're helping, whether you like it or not." I felt my jaw tighten reading it. Assist with road clearance made it sound like I volunteered. I didn't. I bought a home, not a snow storage contract. And the phrase temporary and seasonal was almost funny, because winter where I live isn't a cute 2-week event. It's been months, so I started documenting everything. Every storm, every pile, every broken edge and bent plant. I took photos from the same angle, and I made sure the house number was visible when possible. I recorded dates and times, and when I could, I captured video from a window showing the plow's path. I didn't stand in the street or confront the driver. I just collected proof. I also looked up my property survey from closing. The line between my yard and HOA street was clear. The curb was the curb. My grass was my grass. And if they were pushing snow over that line, that was my private property, simple as that. After the third big storm, I called the HOA office instead of emailing. A receptionist answered in a cheerful voice that didn't match my mood. I explained the situation, mentioned damage, and asked for a solution. She put me on hold, then came back and said the manager was unavailable. I asked when I could speak to them. She said, "Please email." It was like chasing a ghost. I could almost picture my email thread being forwarded around with a note, "This homeowner is complaining again." Meanwhile, my yard was turning into the neighborhood's snow landfill. Then came the day that pushed me from annoyed to furious. A heavy storm hit, and the plows came through multiple times. By morning, the snow pile in my yard was taller than my waist, and the end of my driveway was blocked with icy chunks. I tried backing out for work and couldn't. My tires spun. I shoveled for 40 minutes just to reach the road. I was late, cold, and embarrassed. And when I finally got free, I saw other houses with clean exits. It wasn't just snow removal, it was snow removal at my expense. That evening, I went to an HOA meeting. I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted a fair solution. I brought printed photos, dates, and the property survey. When it was my turn to speak, I explained clearly. The plow was repeatedly dumping snow onto my lawn, damaging property, and blocking my driveway. I asked if the HOA could instruct the plow driver to stop or adjust their route. A board member leaned back in his chair and said, "That's where the snow has always gone." Another person nodded like that settled the issue. I said, respectfully, "Always doesn't make it right. It's my property." The room got quiet. Then the HOA president's smooth voice, practiced smiles, said, "We appreciate your concerns, but our contractor follows the HOA plan. Moving snow elsewhere may compromise street safety." That phrase again, safety. Like my yard being crushed was a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. I asked, "So my lawn is the solution?" He replied, "It's a shared community effort in winter." I almost laughed. A shared effort where only one person pays for the damage is not sharing. On the way out, someone muttered, "Shouldn't have bought the corner lot." That stung more than I expected, like it was my fault for choosing the wrong house. That night, I stood at my window and looked at the pile in my yard. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to scream. And I wasn't going to give them an excuse to call me difficult. I was going to out-organize them. If they wanted to play with paperwork and plans, fine. I could do that too. I called the city the next day not to complain dramatically, but to ask simple questions. I asked about rules for plows, pushing snow onto private lawns, and whether contractors were allowed to pile street snow in a way that damaged property or blocked driveways. The person I spoke with didn't promise miracles, but they did say something important. While snow removal is necessary, contractors and property managers generally shouldn't deposit snow in ways that create hazards or cause damage. They suggested I document it already done, and if it continued, file a formal complaint and request an inspection. I also called my home insurance agent just to understand my options. The agent explained that damage from plowing might be claimable, but it often turns into a messy back and forth about who is responsible. Then they said something even more useful. If you can show a pattern and a responsible party, you may be able to pursue reimbursement. In other words, evidence matters. Suddenly, my photos and videos felt like a shield. I wasn't powerless. I just needed to stay smart and stay calm. The next storm arrived, and I watched again from the window with my phone ready. The plow came through, and like clockwork, cangled the blade at my yard. I filmed it, clear as day, with the curb and my driveway in frame. When the truck passed, I went outside and measured how far the pile crossed into my lawn. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't guess. I measured. Then I sent the video to the HOA manager with a short note. This is not an accidental spillover. Please stop dumping snow on my property. The next step is filing a formal complaint with the city. I hit send and waited. This time they responded quickly, and the tone changed. It wasn't friendly, but it was alert. We will review with the contractor, the manager wrote. It sounded like progression till the next storm, when the same thing happened again. Maybe slightly less, but still onto my lawn. Still blocking the end of my driveway. Still crushing the edges. It felt like the HOA was giving me the smallest concession possible. Like here, we'll dump a little less in your yard, so you'll stop bothering us. But I wasn't asking for less. I was asking for stop. By midwinter, my yard had become a permanent snow fortress made of dirty, compacted piles that never fully melted between storms. It was higher than my fence in some spots, and it kept creeping toward my front steps. Walking to my mailbox felt like climbing out of a trench. I started getting nervous about what would happen when it thawed, all that salt, sand, and debris soaking into my soil. And then, because life loves timing, an HOA letter arrived saying my landscape appearance would be reviewed in spring. I stared at it and said out loud, "You have to be kidding me." That was the moment I decided to build my snow wall. Not in the street. Not blocking a sidewalk. Not doing anything reckless. I planned it carefully. A barrier on my property line that would make it physically difficult for the plow to push snow into my yard. If they insisted snow had to go somewhere, fine. It could stay on the street side where it belonged, or they could haul it away like other neighborhoods do. My goal wasn't to trap anyone. It was to protect my property in the simplest way possible, using the exact material they kept dumping on me. The next morning, I went out with a shovel and a plan. I took the snow they'd piled on my lawn and began packing it into a long, dense ridge right along the inside edge of my property line. I made it neat, straight, and clearly on my side. I added tall driveway markers and reflective tape so it was visible in low light. I left gaps where water could drain. I avoided burying the fire hydrant and kept my distance from the sidewalk. I wasn't trying to create a hazard. I was building a do not cross sign made of snow one that didn't require permission from anyone. It took hours. My back hurts. My gloves froze stiff. But as the ridge grew, I felt a weird sense of peace. For weeks, I had felt like my home was being treated like community property. Now, I was drawing a line literally. By the end, the snow wall was solid and tall enough that a plow blade would have to either stop, lift, or risk climbing up onto it. And if they tried to push snow over it, it would simply roll back toward the roadside. It was the simplest physics lesson I'd ever built. That night, another storm came. I barely slept. Around 3:30 a.m., I heard the plow again. I went to the window and watched the headlights approach. The truck slowed at my corner like always, the blade angled toward my lawn. Then the driver saw the wall. The truck hesitated just a second, like the driver was recalculating. The blade hit the edge of the packed snow ridge and the truck jolted slightly. The driver backed up, adjusted, and then pushed the snow forward without sending it over the curb. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. For the first time all winter, my yard didn't get swallowed. The next morning, I phone buzzed with an email from the HOA manager. The subject line was, "Unapproved obstruction." I opened it and read that my snow barrier was interfering with roadway maintenance and creating risk. They demanded I remove it immediately or face fines. I almost admired the nerve. They had been dumping snow on my property for months, damaging my landscaping, blocking my driveway, ignoring my emails, and now my response was the problem. I replied politely, attaching my survey and a photo showing the wall clearly inside my property line. I wrote, "This is on my property and is intended to prevent damage. Please instruct the plow contractor not to deposit snow on my lawn." They didn't like that answer. Within 2 days, I got a formal violation notice in the mail. It said I was altering drainage patterns and creating an eyesore. An eyesore. In winter, in a snowstorm. I stood in my kitchen holding the letter, and I laughed one sharp laugh, not a happy one. Then I did what I'd learned to do all winter. I documented. I photographed the wall from multiple angles, showing it wasn't blocking sidewalks or streets. And I noted that it was made from snow the HOA placed there in the first place. I also filed the city complaint, attaching the video of the plow dumping onto my yard and the photos of damage. I kept the message short and factual. Dates, times, proof, impact. A city inspector called me back a few days later and asked if they could stop by. When they arrived, they walked the property line with me. They looked at the snow wall, then looked at the road, and then asked, "So the plow has been pushing snow into your yard consistently?" I showed them the video. The inspector's face did that expression people make when they're trying not to show irritation. But the irritation is absolutely there. The inspector explained something that made everything click. The HOA's plow plan was designed for convenience, not fairness. Corner lots often get treated like dumping zones because it keeps the road wider with less effort. But that doesn't mean it's automatically acceptable. They told me that if the contractor was placing snow in a way that damaged private property or blocked access, the HOA could be held responsible. The inspector didn't tell me to keep the wall forever. But they did say I had the right to protect my property as long as I wasn't obstructing public access or creating a dangerous condition. A week later, the HOA called an emergency compliance hearing about my snow wall. That phrase alone made it sound like I'd committed a crime against landscaping. I showed up with a folder, photos, videos, emails, the survey, and the city complaint number. The HOA president opened with a speech about community standards. Then they showed pictures of my snow wall like it was a scandal. I waited, and when it was my turn, I said one sentence. "This wall is made from the snow your contractor has been dumping on my property all winter." I then played the video. In that room on a laptop screen, everyone watched a plow truck deliberately angle its blade and push a wave of snow up and over my curb. You could hear the crunch. You could see it clearly. I paused the video and pointed at the property line. I showed pictures of the broken sprinkler head and the bent tree. I explained how the pile blocked my driveway multiple times. And then I said, calmly, if the HOA wants the wall removed, I want written confirmation that snow will not be deposited on my property again. And I want reimbursement for the damage. For the first time, the board members looked uncomfortable, not angry uncomfortable. Because it's easy to dismiss one homeowner as complaining until there's clear proof on the table. Someone on the board asked, "Why didn't we know about this earlier?" I almost said, "I emailed you repeatedly," but I stayed focused. The manager tried to argue that the wall reduced roadway width. And I responded, "Only because you were using my yard as overflow space. The roadway width you're used to depends on dumping onto private property." After the meeting, a couple of neighbors quietly came up to me. One said they did that to us years ago until we paid to redo our lawn. Another said they were tired of the HOA acting like homeowners existed to absorb costs. It was the first time I felt like I wasn't alone. The HOA board took a recess to discuss. When they returned, the president said they would review the snow removal approach and temporarily suspend fines while it was investigated. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a shift. They were finally reacting instead of ignoring. 2 days later, I noticed something different. A smaller plow truck came through. And instead of pushing snow toward my yard, it kept the blades straighter and made more passes down the street. It took longer, but the snow stayed where it was supposed to. My wall wasn't hit once. And that same afternoon, I got an email from the HOA manager that sounded like it was written through clenched teeth. Contractor has been instructed to avoid depositing snow on private lots where feasible. Where feasible. Not perfect, but better. Then the real twist came. The plow contractor showed up at my door. A guy in a heavy jacket, tired eyes, polite but tense. He said, "Hey, I'm not here to argue. The HOA told us to stop pushing snow into your yard. I didn't know it was an issue before." I told him I didn't blame him personally, but it had been happening all winter. He nodded and said, quietly, "Corner lots always get it. We're told to keep the street wide and move fast. That's the priority." And suddenly I understood the machine. The HOA demanded speed and appearance, and someone else paid the price. Over the next week, the snow piled higher on the street side. The HOA didn't like it. The road looked narrower. Some residents complained that parking was tighter. But here's the thing. It wasn't dangerous. It was just inconvenient compared to what they were used to using my yard as extra space. The HOA's perfect winter streets had been financed by my lawn. Without that hidden dumping spot, they had to face the real reality of snow. You either make more passes, haul it away, or accept that winter takes up space. Of course, the HOA tried one more move. I received a letter saying my snow wall must be removed after the next melt to restore uniform appearance. That was fine by me. I never wanted a snow wall in the first place. I wanted my yard back. I replied in writing. I would remove it when temperatures allowed. And I expected the HOA to repair or reimburse the damage caused by dumping. I included receipts for the sprinkler repair and an estimate for the landscaping cleanup in spring. I didn't threaten. I didn't rant. I simply treated it like what it was, a cost they caused. Spring finally arrived, and the great melt began. The snow wall shrank day by day, revealing what I'd feared: gravel, trash, road salt, and broken twigs packed into my lawn. My grass looked bruised. The area near the curb was thin and muddy. But at least it was my mess now, not an ongoing attack. The HOA tried to act like the whole issue was resolved, but I wasn't letting the damage disappear with the snow. I sent updated photos and the cleanup estimate. The city inspector also followed up and requested confirmation that the dumping had stopped. That's when the HOA finally offered a settlement. Careful and clearly designed to make the problem go away quietly. They agreed to cover the sprinkler repair and contribute toward reseeding the damaged area, as long as I signed a statement that I wouldn't pursue further claims for that season. I read it twice. I didn't love the idea of signing anything, but the amount was fair enough. And what I wanted most was a permanent change going forward. I negotiated one more clause, a written note in the snow removal plan stating that private lots were not to be used for snow storage without homeowner permission. The next winter, I watched like a hawk. The first storm came, the plows arrived, and the trucks handled the corner differently. They made extra passes, and when piles built up, a loader came later to relocate snow to a designated area. It wasn't as fast, and the street wasn't as wide as before. But it was reasonably, most importantly, my yard stayed intact. A neighbor joked, "Guess you trained them." I said, "No, I just made them follow the property line." And I realized how strange it was that it took so much effort to get something so basic respected. Looking back, the snow wall wasn't really about snow. It was about boundaries, literal and personal. The HOA treated my property like a convenient dumping ground because it was easier than doing the job properly. They counted on me staying quiet, getting tired, or feeling intimidated. Instead, I documented, stayed calm, used official channels, and built a temporary barrier that forced them to face what they were doing. And if there's one thing I learned, it's this: when someone tells you, "That's how it's always been," it usually means, "That's how we get away with it." This time, they didn't.